Greetings, fellow RotoBallers. Welcome back. It is week 6. It is the Checkdown. My name is Joey Christopoulos with our co-host David Rispoli. This is the show that gives you all our favorite QB starts and sits for week 6 and tight ends starts and sits week 6. That's a mouthful, Dave. Let's take a look at last week's picks real quick. Kirk Cousins, meh. Joe Burrow, yes. Tom Brady, when Harry met Sally, yes. Our sits, Matt Ryan, no. He played pretty well. Tyler Heineke, yes. Bust. Start, Gesicki, meh. Dawson Knox, hell yes. Sits, Pitts, no. Tanyan, yes. Dave, welcome back. It's week 6. We got some bye weeks. Falcons, Saints, 49ers, Jets. How are you?
Dude, Joey, that was a lot, my friend. That reminded me of like the Micro Machines guy back in the day. Hit it, yes, no, good, bad, up, down. We had a roller coaster ride last week, folks. Well, I'm excited about this week, Joey. Last week, I felt like we learned a lot about a lot of teams. You know, I say it always takes 4 weeks. I feel like maybe this year it's taken 5. There's a lot of teams, but I feel like the good news is there aren't really any defenses that I'm totally terrified of. This isn't the Ravens of 2 years ago or Steelers last year or Bears 3-4 years ago. I feel like good players are doing well, even in bad matchups. We're learning here on the Checkdown. Hopefully you guys are learning as fantasy managers.
And another thing that I learned as well is it's getting to the point now where we're getting further away from that week 1. Whatever happened in week 1 kind of doesn't tell the full story with a lot of these teams. The Bills lost, the Packers got blown out by the Saints. Are those things real, or was that really just an extended preseason? I think we're starting to get into what teams are and what teams aren't. The other thing I learned too as well is you guys and the listeners, bring in those comments. Last week, 80 comments underneath right here, so everyone come on back with your fantasy questions and concerns. It doesn't have to be QB and tight end, even though we're more than happy to answer that. But any questions you have for your fantasy lineup, just let us know. Dave, kick us off, man. This is our QB starts for week 6. Who do you got? Who's the headliner?
For me, it's 2 quarterbacks, and it's one game, and it's a game that I normally avoid as a fantasy manager. Thursday Night Football. It has this trope of being a very low-scoring, garbage to watch kind of game. No, that is not the case. That is not the case, especially in 2021. Of all winning teams on Thursday Night Football, they've put up at least 24 points of offense. And even the losing teams, not named the Texans, have averaged 22 points, Joey. So they've been close games. They've been fairly high-scoring games. Tom Brady is one of only 5 fantasy players right now to score 20-plus fantasy points in 4 out of the 5 games this year, Joe. He's on a roll, but there's only one fantasy player in all of fantasy, Joe, who has scored 20-plus fantasy points in all 5 games. I battled you in the comments last week over him versus Cousins. It's Jalen Hurts. He's an absolute start this week. In fact, I think Jalen Hurts has finally got into that upper echelon of must starts every week, man. I mean, the floor is there, the ceiling's there. I think this guy may be the real deal.
Dave, you're screaming at me, and I absolutely love it because you're 100% correct, man. Jalen Hurts got 270 all-purpose yards in every single game except for this last week. 7 passing, 3 rushing. Plays a Tampa Bay defense that's allowing 319 passing yards a game. Oh, and by the way, hint, week 7 for more bye weeks as they're starting to roll out there. Justin Fields versus Tampa Bay. Going to lay that seed just right now. I love the call, man. Tom Brady, we called the bounce back last week. We say we keep it rolling this week. It's a great move, man. Speaking of guys who's been in the comments, man, Dave, let me tell you something. When it comes to fantasy football, it is not our first Heineke, okay? Now, look. He's our start this week. Taylor Heineke versus KC. Now, look, we've been back and forth on this guy all season long. You want to know why? Because we're trying to help you fantasy freaks out there. This is the guy that is a matchup-based starter. When the matchup is right, he is a playable top 10 piece. When it's not right, you got to put him on your bench. This is not a set it or forget it quarterback. This week, this is a set it matchup for him versus KC. Look, you know, it's happening right now. Last week, he threw 2 picks. We said that he wasn't going to work out. The Kansas City Chiefs right now, they've allowed 9 touchdowns over the last 3 games. They've allowed an average of 32.44 fantasy points a game to their last 4 quarterbacks, Dave. I'm not saying Taylor Heineke gets you 32 fantasy points, but I am saying, can he get you 20? Can he get you 25? I'm saying yes, this matchup is built for him to have a bounce-back game after last week. Last week he was a sit. This week he's a start. Put Heineke back in your lineups.
I love the call, Joe, and I also love the call for daily fantasy players. Haven't seen the pricing yet. My guess is his price will be nice. Definitely a cash game play. Stack him with Terry McLaurin. Sign me up. Joe, this next name is a name I promised you we would never utter on the check down, but sometimes you just got to. We're trying to help fantasy managers.
My heart.
I understand. It is Aaron Rodgers going against our Bears. I know what you're thinking. Start Aaron Rodgers, duh. But there's probably a lot of fantasy managers out there that are looking, Yahoo, ESPN, and they see a red light matchup with the Bears. We've been pretty good against opposing quarterbacks, especially in the last couple of games. We've really come alive. Hello, Big Mac. But Aaron Rodgers has our number. He really does. Just like last year.
And he calls it whenever he wants. And we pick up and he goes, ha, 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 and we're like, dude, we're trying to sleep. And
well, do you know what? He orders 4 tutties every time, because last year in both games that he played the Bears, he threw 4 tutties in each of them. I'm not saying he's going to throw 4 tutties this time, but I'm telling you, he's going to throw 4 tutties this time. I'm going to go ahead and start Aaron Rodgers. Do not be scared of the matchup, folks.
Yeah, it's begrudgingly, dude. It's a great call. Look, the Bears defense has been improved the last couple of weeks, but yeah, he's had their number in past years. And the other one too is that, like, man, a lot of his yard share right now is going to Devontae Adams. It was like 205 to 344. 205 it went to Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is also a big start this week too, as well, because we have a hard time stopping him as well. I can't fight that feeling. You should probably start Aaron Rodgers. It's a good call. And my final one, real quick, I just want to throw it out there. As a streaming matchup, Trevor Lawrence versus Miami. Now, look, we said it last week, and I'm a firm believer of this, Dave. And you were correct on this. The London games, they're just hard to figure out, okay? They're really tough. If you got to play some guys, you got to play some guys. And look, we said no on Kyle Pitts, but then Calvin Ridley was out with an injury, and Kyle Pitts stepped up. You know what I mean? So you never know what exactly is going to happen. This is another situation with the London game. But here's what I will say is the Dolphins have allowed 17 fantasy points to their last 4 quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, the turnovers have kind of subsided a little bit. He got a rushing touchdown last week. I'm just kind of seeing Trevor Lawrence over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. I think he's going to be on the check down more and more, Dave. I'm not loving this matchup for a streamer. If he's available, pick him up. If you want to try and play him this week, go for it. I think there's going to be brighter days ahead for Trevor Lawrence, so I just want to throw him out there too as well.
I think it's a great call, Joey, because in a league, I'm starting Trevor Lawrence over our next quarterback, who's my number 1 sit this week. It's a guy I have the biggest love-hate relationship with in all of the NFL, Ryan Tannehill, a guy I drafted way too much of, Joe. And this week he's taking on Buffalo. This is a guy who's we talked about guys who've been breaking 20 plus fantasy points a game. Ryan Tannehill, he's only done it once. He's thrown for 1 tutty, only 1 tutty in 3 of the 5 games so far. And one of those games he threw for no tutties. I love tutties, Joey. That's why it's my name, @tuttyguy. He don't throw them. I don't want to watch him. And I think mostly it's because, hey, all hail. Bow down to King Henry. You don't need to throw tutties when King Henry's rushing for 150 yards every game and 3 tutties. So I just think this is a game they're going to try and keep Josh Allen off of the field. We all think like, oh, Buffalo puts out a lot of offensive output. It's going to be a shootout. He's just not getting it done. A.J. Brown does not look healthy. He was on a snap count last year. Chester Rogers, just a milk carton of who's who wide receivers behind them. Tannehill's a sit for me. He's going to have to prove it before he's back in my lineup.
Dave, if you got fantasy points for handing the ball off to Derrick Henry, he would be king of the world, wouldn't he? He'd be on the edge of the boat going like this. I'm the king of the world, but it's not how that works out. And he plays the Buffalo team. They were giving up the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, right? That is red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, they have 8 interceptions over their last 3 games. And allowing opposing quarterbacks not named Patrick Mahomes, they're only allowing an average of 164 passing yards a game, Dave. I'm right there with you. It's not a great play. Start Derrick Henry, not Ryan Tannehill. My next sit of the week, mine's got to be Derek Carr against the Broncos. Derek Carr got off to a nice start this season. I think some people might have picked him up. He might be a QB2 in 2 quarterback leagues right now. You're trying to ride the hot hand. Well, the hot hand is getting cold. The guy's had to leave the last 2 weeks with an injury. This time was with a head injury. He's a little banged up right now. The Raiders offense sputtering a touch, and then they get a Broncos D that is not allowing Buffalo fewest fantasy points, Broncos second fewest fantasy points. Dave, we're going where the money is on this one. They've allowed only 5 passing TDs all season long. I don't think a lot of them are going to come from Derek Carr this week. If you got him in some lineups, I would maybe look for some different options or just try and understand that he might be trending downwards over the next couple weeks until maybe hopefully he finds a heater again.
Yeah, and the Broncos, let's go to the other side of the ball real quick. They're a team that loves to chew the clock. They got two great backs. They can keep Derek Carr and the Raiders off the field for as much as they want this game. And I just don't see it being a high-scoring game. My guess is if I were to look at the Vegas totals, this would be around the lowest. These are two offenses that are struggling with pretty decent defenses. And the other thing is, as a Darren Waller fantasy manager, I mean, week one set my expectations through the roof. I'm expecting 16 targets a game. He's getting like 4 to 5 catches now. They seem out of sync. I keep seeing Derek Carr missing Darren Waller, let alone all of these other receivers. I love the call, Joe. Sit Derek Carr, sit Tannehill. If I have Trevor Lawrence, I'm starting him over both those guys.
Yeah, great call, man. Let's move over to our tight ends. We've been doing pretty good in this category. The starts have been good. The sits have been fine. So let's get our tight end starts for week 6. Dave, who do you got on the list, man? Who's your shining star?
Speaking of the other side of the Raiders, let's start a Bronco. Let's start Fant versus Vegas. Now, I know what you're thinking. Not a huge week, hasn't really had a ton of huge weeks, but he did lead all tight ends in routes per drop back in week 5. Cool. That's something I really like to see. He's had at least 3 receptions in every game this year, and you're thinking 3 receptions, okay, big deal. These are tight ends. 3 receptions, and he falls in the end zone. He's a top 10 tight end for that week. He's super consistent. Teddy Bridgewater looks his way often. I could really see him leaning on him in this game for sure.
Yeah, I love the call, man. Noah Fant, averaging 6.2.
I thought you were going to say no offense. Hey, man, no offense.
Averaging 6.2 targets this year. Give me that all day long from the tight end position. The Raiders, they've allowed 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. 1 to Jared Cook, 1 to our boy, the former ex-Check darling ourselves, Donald Parham, and then Uncle Jesper Horsted this last week. I think he's got a great chance to not only get targets, but maybe find the end zone. I'm right there with you on that. My next start of the week, mine's Hunter Henry versus Dallas. This is moving along very nicely, right? I think he's kind of eclipsed Jonnu Smith as, you know, the safety valve for Mac Jones in the offense. Cowboys, talented defense, right? We're talking Diggs, we're talking Parsons, and yet they've been a little susceptible to the tight end. They've allowed 4 50-yard games to 4 different tight ends already this season. Look, that's a strong floor that I already want to start working with from a tight end perspective. Henry's coming off his best game of the year, 6 catches, 75 yards, 1 touch. And he's averaging over 6 targets a game the last 3 games. I just think that's a good timeshare. I think he'll get the opportunities against a pretty solid, decent matchup. Give me that Hunter Henry, baby. I think he's starting to become a guy that needs to be started, you know, in any format. He can be a top 10 tight end for sure all season.
I love the call, Joe. Speaking of New England, on the other side of that ball, Joey, I'm wondering if you're going to talk about the other tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. He's a sit this week. This is a guy who's red hot, Dalton Schultz. He's been on fire. I mean, he's been in the top 10 fantasy tight end since week 2. He seems to be like the second option, maybe, much begrudgingly to CeeDee Lamb owners on the Dallas Cowboys. Why is he a sit?
It's because you're right. He's off to a great start. He's getting a ton of targets. He's got 17 yards in the last 3 games, but the Pats have been brutal on tight ends. Here's a fun stat of the week.
Hit it.
Fantasy chuckleheads out there. The highest amount of tight end yards that they've given up to a single tight end all season is 29 to Cameron Brate. They're allowing the second fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. I still like a lot of the Cowboys in this matchup. I like Dak Prescott. I like Zeke if he's healthy. Cooper, Lamb, rock and roll. I just think from Dalton Schultz, I think he stays out of the end zone this week. I think he'll still get the targets. He can still maybe be involved, but man, I'm thinking 5, 6, 7 points instead of maybe the 11, 12, 13 that a lot of fantasy freaks are going to be banking on. He's just a sit for me. I don't think he maybe puts up the production that he's trending towards right now against a tough matchup.
Well, I got a real spicy sit, Joe, for my last tight end. Let me just hit you with some stat lines over the last 3 weeks. 2 catches, 10 yards. 4 catches, 42 yards. 2 catches, 22 yards. That sounds like a tight end 3 to me, Joey, but that is actually TJ Hawkinson the last 3 weeks. He's a sit for me. Something's not right, Joe.
Yeah.
It's a knee issue. He doesn't look healthy. And, oh, yeah, He's still on the Lions. This was my concern in the preseason for this guy is how many tutties is this guy going to get? And the whole thing, the positive to TJ Hawkinson, well, he's going to be the number one in the Lions. He's going to get like 12 targets a game.
That was the promise. Yeah.
That's not happening. So he's not falling in the end zone and he's not getting the targets and catches you need to really be a tight end one right now. And he's facing Cincinnati, who held Big Bob Tonyan to 8 yards. And a few weeks back, both Eric Ebron and Pat Freiermuth only got 22 yards between them. They've been really good against the tight end. I don't like the matchup and I don't like where TJ Hawkinson's trending right now, Joe.
Yeah, Bengals, they're a red light matchup for tight ends, 6th fewest in the NFL. And look, yeah, Hawkinson, look, he's going to be on a lot of rosters. You're probably going to have to play him, but we're just telling you right now he's going to be questionable all week long. He definitely has a knee injury. He 1,000% is playing through it. And Dave, all that preseason stuff that you mentioned is correct. That's why I drafted him in one of my leagues, man, because I was like, look, the Lions are going to be inconsistent and mediocre on offense at best, but at least they're going to be just chucking the ball to Hawkinson all day long. If he's compromised right now and he's still trying to gut through it just for the good of the team, good for him, pat on the back. Doesn't help out fantasy leagues, right? I think it's time to sit him. Maybe find some other options out there. CJ Azuma. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like find something else. But no, I'm throwing it out there. Jesper Horsted? Uncle Jesper? No, baby. That's my sit of the tight ends for the week there. And hopefully he can get healthy soon because definitely a dude that has Pro Bowl caliber talent, Dave. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%.
I just don't think he's 100% right now to be out there on the field, help people out. Dave, that'll do it, man. Week 6, the checkdown.
I feel good about it. I'm calling it now, Joe. 100% correct this week. This is the week. I'm calling it, Joey. No, I'm doing it.
And the play.
100%. Get in there, commenters. You heard it. No, I'm kidding. It's the NFL, people. We're here to learn. You win or you learn. We're trying our best. We're getting the data as each game progresses. Defenses are figuring out. Offenses is figuring out. The most important thing you can be doing as a fantasy manager is adapting, is not holding on to preseason calls. And we're doing the same thing as fantasy analysts here at RotoBaller. We're figuring it out. We're adapting. We're going, okay, a couple of weeks ago, we thought this looks like it's this. That's the beauty of the NFL, people.
Yeah, it's going to move in waves throughout the year, so prepare yourself. And the new wave right now is going to be bye weeks coming up, everyone. So not everyone's going to be able to play their stud every single week. So remember, if you have those questions, comments, those concerns, bring them underneath of these comments here. Joey Christopoulos at Joey Sports Guy, Dave Rispoli at Tutty Guy. We're there to answer them for you all week long to help you set your lineup. Again, 80 comments last week. Let's bring it up. Let's get to 100, baby. I want them triple digits. We're more than happy to answer them for you. Thank you so much for checking out this video. This was the Checkdown Week 6 QB Start Stits. TE start sits week 6. Put it all together. It sounds delicious when it's coming out of my mouth. Thank you so much for checking out this episode, everybody. We'll be back next week. Until then, go win that league, all right? Be well.
Win that league.
Have some fun. See you down there.